I've been making serious considerations about whether I should bother at all with this wildflower meadow. It was a place where I dug over, I seeded it, then the next year I cut it back and took away the clippings. I replanted some yellow rattle quite a few times, never got any to establish, tried to germinate some plugs but used an ineffective method. It's always the lawn grasses that just dominate it. Part of that is that I just skimmed off the surface, and that meant that I probably didn't take away enough of the fertility in the topsoil, as well as leaving a lot of the roots undisturbed for the perennial grasses that were in there. But part of the reason is that I've come to think whether they are uniquely valuable just for garden wildlife. If you have to put in so much effort, you should really consider what the reward is. Part of the reason why I was doing it was because of the challenge. It felt like, oh, this is almost like a degree level of wildlife gardening, rather than actually looking up what the ecological data was on whether it was worth having one. The main argument in my head was, if gardens are so ill-suited to this type of, especially small urban gardens, if they're so ill-suited to managing in this type of way, rather than say on marginal land that hay meadows used to be on, is it worth the amount of resources that we put into creating them? Could you be doing something that's less effort but provides the same amount of benefit to wildlife, while also looking just as good, arguably a bit better in a garden setting? If you think about it, even just managing a garden for food crops is going to mean that you've got lots of things in flower for lots of the year, because you're deliberately managing things so that you get a succession of plantings and a succession of crops. So there's loads of stuff that's in flower all the time. And in that case, a lot of the wildlife will actually be pests, so you're trying to get rid of them. But lots of things will happily coexist with you and your veg, as lots of people who do vegetable gardening know. But back to the question about whether it's actually worth doing. In the biodiversity for urban gardens in Sheffield that was conducted by Ken Thompson, among other people, they didn't find any evidence that wildflower meadows in a garden setting would necessarily increase wildlife. Gardens are often very fertile and they require a lot of effort in order to turn them into a wildflower meadow. But the abundance and the range of wildlife, so all of the invertebrates that were in there, mainly invertebrates because they are the largest component of garden wildlife, didn't increase if you had a wildflower meadow. There's even research suggesting that just letting areas become quite weedy is just as good as having a wildflower meadow. But because most gardens are fertile, does it really make sense to treat them as though they were only good for growing hay? The loss of habitat of hay meadows, is it a proper justification as to why you should turn your garden into one in order to combat that change? Will you get the same habitat that was lost? With things like cornfield annuals, growing poppies, cornflowers and corncockles do a fairly similar job in giving you a beautiful area of your garden that looks quite wild, and you're going to have a much greater success with doing that. Cornfield annuals are another habitat that has been lost through intensification and modernisation of farming methods. And because of its decreased difficulty, you're probably going to get greater participation. Way more people are going to be successful with it, and that's going to get more people on board with it. So I don't think it's very helpful to be snooty about cornfield annuals, as lots of people who are into conservation and ecology and gardening, I know that's obviously quite a small group because now you've just created 3 subcategories. People who are into that often turn their noses up at cornfield annuals, and there isn't really any reason to do that in a garden setting. It's certainly better than just having a mown lawn. And they do provide for a lot of pollinators and the creatures that will live and feed on the vegetation and hide in it, nest in it, you name it, they'll use it. What is true is that the data in the bug study did show that areas of long grass did massively increase the amount of biodiversity in a garden. So many things will live in and nest and lay eggs and eat the vegetation of long grass, and you do have other options other than just growing a hay meadow. If you read Chris Bain's book on wildlife gardening, he mentions the different ways that you could manage your back garden and your lawn area in order to encourage different wildflowers to proliferate. So he actually gives advice on the cutting regimes that you could use. So if you were to cut at the beginning of June, then some of the plants that grow outward and spread will have a chance to be able to flower, because normally the stems will just be cut short and they never have an opportunity to flower. Neither do the grasses, which is part of the reason why allowing them to grow a bit longer, and initiatives like No Mow May are really excellent. Things like Achillea and Catsia will start to proliferate and flower if you leave your lawn. If you've just been cutting it normally but not putting any lawn weed killer on, you've probably got some of those in there already. So if you just leave it at the start of May or at the start of June, depending on conditions, let it grow long and then cut it back again after a month to 6 weeks, then you're going to get a lot of those plants that will have time to flower and go to seed. And I know that this area doesn't get any particularly special management, it just gets mowed fairly infrequently. So rather than giving you the entirely doom and gloom outlook of thinking that you won't be able to do it, I think that this should give you a fair bit of hope in that just changing your mowing regimen will actually cause a significant different number of species to flower and provide for things in your garden. So I hope that that gives you a bit more of an uplifting message, that if a place like this, where it's not really even deliberately managed for these reasons, but it can still provide a lot, should make you feel a bit better. It makes me feel better anyway. He also gives specific recommendations for growing a hay meadow in your garden, and says about how important it is to get rid of the fertility by doing a lot of mowing in the first few years even that you have it, so letting it grow long and cutting it right back, so and taking away all of those clippings so that you can reduce the fertility. Otherwise you're going to get what I had, which is a few flowers or forbs in this sense, because they're the non-grasses, a couple of interesting grasses, but mainly just lawn grasses that start to dominate. In the area that you plan to have your hay meadow, you could actually grow hungry crops like potatoes or sunflowers in order to reduce the fertility even further. And that's why I gave you a bit of a shock at the start of the video. I'm just cutting mine right back to reduce the fertility. I'm still not ready to give it up just yet. I've collected some yellow rattle seeds when I was on a walk recently, and I've planted up a tray of them with, so you see this little, comes like this, and then the seeds rattle inside these little pods. I'll keep some of these in case I'm not effective on this one. But I've put them in a module tray with a little bit of Yorkshire fog seed, which is just a grass. You could probably just collect any grass seed, so long as you're not going to then reintroduce your lawn grasses, but they're probably in there anyway, so you could probably just use any grass seed, so that will germinate now. The yellow rattle would normally be shedding its seeds about now too, so it's going to be perfectly fine with dropping those seeds in with it. Then over the winter I'll let them get cold so that they can germinate in the spring, and then I've got a load of plugs that I can then put into the lawn. In an acidic environment, I've seen that people will use red Bartsia, which is another semi-parasite on grasses. So I'm not ready to give it up just yet, because I don't know, you could call it the sunk cost fallacy, where you continue to throw good resources after bad. There probably is an element of that at play. I hope I haven't put anybody off, but I wanted to give people the realistic information about the whole thing. I would encourage anyone to try it, because I think having such a long-term project that you can think of in terms of each 5 years is quite a good thing to have, and you've still got all the other things that you can do that are far more present. So in the next day, or you can just go out to the garden and enjoy things, so long as you have a big enough garden to be able to have a small area of meadow plus your other sections of garden. But also don't feel bad if you want to grow poppies and cornfield annuals, because they're also beneficial and you are going to get a payoff much sooner, and they look spectacular if you just dig over an area and then sow those cornfield annuals. It looks amazing. You do get a slightly shorter flowering period and it starts to look a bit naff after that, but the nature of flowers is that they're ephemeral. That's why you like getting cut flowers. That is their value. You can't just go giving plastic flowers to people and expecting the same reaction. So I always find it a strange argument when people say that they don't like something because it doesn't have value for long enough. Most things only have a very limited period of true value. Anyway, that's going miles outside of the scope of the video. I'm going to probably give it another cut this year, as though I was treating it like a hay field, which is that you would cut it in the summer, then let animals graze on it, which would then be cutting it again. So I'll be cutting it again at least once, maybe twice, but not expecting very much to actually happen anymore. So, because although I did have a few things in there that I liked, it was just too dominated by the grasses. Still lots to look forward to next year, and come back if that's something you want to see, because I'll obviously upload it and let you all know about it. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you've considered trying, whether this has put you off, or whether you're just irritated that I didn't know what I was talking about and that you wanted to tell me what it is that you know so much about. I can't wait to see those comments. Thanks very much, and I'll see you at least next year if you're only watching these wildflower videos. But if you want to watch some of the other videos on my channel related to houseplants, composting, I'll leave one of those now. You should be able to see it. You'll enjoy them, I promise. They're some of the best videos on YouTube, according to my mum. I don't actually think she's seen them, so I might have told a lie.